Hello and welcome to another episode of the Dev and Doc podcast. I am Zeljko and I'm associate professor at UCL, specialized in artificial intelligence for healthcare.
And I'm Josh. I'm a doctor and AI researcher and a certified PhD dropout.
So today we have a fun one. We'll be discussing, is it worth it doing a PhD in 2025? Or what are all the good reasons for doing a PhD?
And I guess I'll be covering the reasons why a PhD may not be for you in 2025.
I think today is the best time ever to do a PhD in computer science or AI or applied AI. I think there was never a better time to do this.
If you want to be up to date and be at the forefront, you're not reading journals. You're not reading.
Exactly. Yeah, you're not reading journals. Yes, exactly. Papers published in journals. I don't know when was something I read last time from a journal. Everything I'm reading is published on archive or medRxiv on the preprint servers or blog posts. We went a bit wrong and the metrics became, let's just publish more. You have to publish more. You have to do more. You have to have more papers. You have to publish 5 papers a year. And that is the only thing you get rewarded for. One of the only criterias me as an academic has is how many papers did I publish or how many citations did I get, which to me is the absolute wrong motivator for anyone.
Congratulations as well on your new professorship.
Thank you.
I'm very happy for you.
I want to mention that it's a honorary position just to not get into trouble.
Still counts, honorary.
Oh, I'm very happy with that. I'm very happy with the honorary one. It is.
Can you put it in your documents? That's the main thing, like your passport or your driver's license.
That's the first thing I'll do. I'll cancel all my documents, exchange everything so that it can be official.
Okay, look, let's get into it. But I think this time we're taking a step back from doing the usual like AI and healthcare episodes, taking a step back from large language models. As you can see, the mood is more chill here. For the listeners, I'm sat on my couch, which is, I usually sit on my desk. This is a more relaxed vibe. We're just going to talk about, reasons why you should do a PhD in 2025, the good and the bad. And, cover the ins and outs. So gives viewers maybe a chance to think about, is it for them and how they can go about pursuing it.
I didn't get the memo for the nice and cozy environment. For me, everything is normal. But okay, next time I'll be prepared.
Next time. This is a chill episode. But look, why don't we start by asking, why did you do a PhD? Like what made you pursue your PhD in the first place?
In this episode, I mostly want to talk a bit about my experience and understand what did I do well, what I now think that I could have done better, what could have been different, or how could I have improved and all of that. I don't want to go too much into the advice giving, but it's more like, here is what I've done and you decide for yourself what makes the most sense. For me, basically 6 years ago, I wanted to switch areas. So I was still doing or already doing AI and NLP and all of that for quite a bit, 6-7 years. I was in industry for 5 years at that time. And I was thinking, okay, I want to go into healthcare. I felt like the biggest impact you can make with AI is in fact in healthcare. I still feel that is completely true. And in fact, 1,000,000 times more than it was 6 years ago. And the best way I felt to achieve this was go do a PhD, because that gives me access to hospitals, to doctors, to, even if I wanted to go into mental health, to psychiatrists, to basically it gives me full access to switch areas and to really go and do the dirty work that maybe in industry, healthcare is a bit special in that sense that industries don't really have access to hospitals, but universities, especially university hospitals, you can easily get access to patients, to data, to whatever basically you need.
That's really interesting because you've kind of done it in reverse. Normally people do a PhD to get the skills to then get a job in industry that's better paying, but instead you have kind of worked in industry and then realized that you want to take a step back into academia. But it sounds like you had a real like idea, right, what you wanted to do and why you wanted to do it. I guess my question to you is, was it like an adjustment going back from being like an industry work and industry salary and environment to a PhD kind of life, student life?
I mean, there was a bit of adjustment. This was also like one of the reasons why my PhD was part-time. So I still kept working in industry. I still kept like 2 jobs basically while doing the PhD, which basically makes some things a bit easier. As we know, like the stipends students get or salaries PhD people get are not the best. So basically like I still kept a bit of the jobs, so to get a bit more on the money side, but still to be able to do the PhD so that I can live decently. I do think like in my mind, currently looking at this, I feel like this was the best way to do it. I'm sure there are other opinions, but I loved this approach because I feel like the experience I got in industry, which was like a lot of, for example, even time management, project management, some more domain specific skills like how to do proper coding, how to prepare stuff for production, how to maintain the code you wrote, how to write proper documentation. Like this is now much more in the programming side. I feel like really gave me a nice base layer because you don't get taught these in a PhD. Like in a PhD, you get your project and you go off and you do it. There is no introductory courses to how to manage your repositories or how to manage your time or something. And I think I learned a lot about that in industry, and then could basically could get a running start in the PhD. I basically started coding from day one, and it was also maybe a bit more specific for me because I knew what I want to do. I had the idea what I want to achieve. So like day one when I joined, opened the laptop, I started building what I want to make. So it was a bit more, there was no in-between time. I just started immediately.
My version is that, I was also doing a part-time PhD and I found it very hard to balance, my clinical work as a doctor and the like PhD degree at the same time. Like I felt like I was kind of burning the candle on both ends, and I wasn't doing either to the standard that I would want to. So I think that's like the other side for me. Like it was very hard to work full time, like work 4 or 5 days, 3-4 days clinically, and then try and do the PhD on the side. I just felt like I didn't have time for life and for rest after that.
Yeah, but I mean, that makes perfect sense. I think the clinical work was on one side also extremely stressful and extremely demanding. Like on my side, the industry work was a day a week. So it was very relaxed, and it was not even a day. It was like a couple of meetings throughout the week, because I still spent like quite a bit of time in industry. I spent like 6 years before this. So my roles were more advisory management roles than they were I have to sit down and do stuff. So I could do whatever, 5 half-an-hour meetings a week, and that was enough to do my job like really well.
So look, you've completed your PhD, and what did you think were the biggest positives and negatives from your experience? Is there anything you'd want to teach or share with our listeners?
I have, luckily, many more positives than negatives. I think like still doing this one was one of the best options I've done. I cannot judge it about the other options because again I haven't done them, but I'm very happy with the options, with the option I've chosen. Like some things I loved was the ability to chase moonshots. People don't really present a PhD like this, I think, but when I started this like 6 years ago, I was basically thinking, oh, I want to be able to predict the patient's future. Everything, not a specific thing. I just want to be able to predict everything. Saying this 6 years ago was unreasonable. It was impossible. Like if basically when I mentioned this, I remember still I mentioned this initially to my clinical supervisor. They was like, yeah, sure, it's fine. And most doctors I spoke with about this, yeah, no.
Yeah, I mean, even if you tell me now, I'd be like, yeah, no. And, you know, to have something that's actually usable and functional and there's a whole thing. But look, you built an amazing model and paper, which, you know, we can share. But yeah, you actually did that. Like you went and built that exact thing.
Yeah, and I feel like that's what the PhD allows you. It basically allows you to put a completely unreasonable goal and just shoot for it. If you even completely fail, I still think there is something in the scientific method. You will, on one side, you will learn a lot. Mm-hmm. But on the other side, a negative result is also a result. Many people don't like these too much, and in the PhD, it's like it's a bit frowned upon, but it is still fine to write a paper and present negative results. And even when I was planning for the moonshot, that was not like when I was planning how to do it, I was looking at the components that I needed and making sure that even every one of these components individually is very useful. So even if the moonshot in the end fails, I still have like 5-6 components that I've made, like the base layer on top of which you can build the moonshot, that are still nice things you can present. So it really allows you to like do whatever you want without almost no consequences.
And these moonshots, the different components, was it purely like a project or a task thing, and did you identify like do some components need certain people to help you or certain skills you need to learn? How does that work?
No, it was exactly like that. Like a lot of these components needed certain people. I also needed to understand the medical and clinical side. Like you need to understand basically like how it was structured. It's like, this is what I want to achieve. What are the things I need to be able to achieve that? And then it was like, oh, one of the tools was whatever. I'll just mention a couple of things. We don't have to go into details, but like one of the things.
Give me an example, like the biggest component that you saw, like the biggest task you had to do to be able to predict a patient's future. What was it?
Yeah, but it was like start from the beginning. To predict the future, you need to know the past. And basically how it was like, where do I get the patient's past? It is you get it from electronic health records in hospitals. How do I access that? I need something that will harmonize, structure the data. So let's build that. Again, given the scientific method, it's also like first step is check out, is there anything out there that can solve these problems so that I don't have to make it? Unfortunately, there was nothing. So I went off and built that thing. Then the second thing was like, oh, I need something that protects the patient privacy because I cannot just be using these data out of the box and ignore the patient privacy. So the second thing that I made is like, okay, we need something to anonymize this data and so on. Basically, those were the building blocks. But what was awesome is that each one of those building blocks turned out to be also useful for many other projects. Like there was 20, 30 other projects that have used the building blocks, and that even if my moonshot failed or was a negative result, I would still have a lot of these building blocks that are useful and that like... And
that could be the PhD, right? People don't realize.
Exactly.
Like when you start a PhD, you give them a title and an outline of what you want to do. But from all the PhDs I've spoken to, like what you actually end up with is often quite different to what you
Yeah.
started with, like the title. Maybe not for you. I think you maybe ended up doing something quite
A bit
similar to
lucky,
what you
yeah,
wanted.
but
But usually, like I'd say majority end up doing something very different. Like the title sounds nothing like the first one.
yeah, exactly. You change a million times. Most people that have done the PhD together with me changed 5 times what they are doing and how they are doing it and what approach are they taking and whatever else. So
And that's a skill in itself that you learn from PhD, right? Like how to pivot, how to
yeah.
be resourceful and use what you have at your disposal and make the most of it. So I think that is also another skill that you can learn.
Oh, exactly. You learn how to fail very, very much so. Basically, like on one side, you failed writing papers. Every paper I've submitted was rejected at least 2 times before we get it out there. And it's not, again, I don't think like the final version was that big of a change between the first version, but you just understand what works, what doesn't work, how to position it, how to pivot it. And even approaches I've picked, like many of these tools that I was just mentioning, like for example, the first tool I made, that was the structuring of data, took 1.5 years to make. Currently,
Wow.
I would make it in 2 weeks. It is not because on one side it is a bit easier today, but on the other side, now I know how to make it. Like I failed 1 million times the first time I was doing it, and you learn an enormous amount about the domain because healthcare was new for me. I didn't know what are the problems, and for most people that will go into a PhD, it will be like that.
Okay, so look, moonshots, going for moonshots, I think that's great. Like normally in industry, you're beholden to the company and their goals and their deadlines. So you can't just say, "Oh, I want to go for this crazy moonshot," if it doesn't necessarily help the industry or the company's pressing goal. What other positives do you take away from your PhD?
I think, like, to be honest, there are many. I don't want to now list like 100 things because I could really list 100 things that I think are really nice. Some of the big ones is learning. Like you get access to the biggest experts in the world, and it is awesome how you can send a mail to almost anyone you want. At some point I sent a mail, I think, or a message or something, I don't know, to the head of AI in Hugging Face. And they just responded, "Oh, let's do something together." Or you can basically like contact any expert you like. There is a professor somewhere that is doing exactly what I'm interested in. I can just send them a mail. I need to get access to a doctor. I can basically just like almost walk into the hospital and be like, "Hey guys, can I speak with someone about this topic?" And you'll find the time somewhere because you are coming from the university. Like you are not a company trying to steal something or whatever. No, you're just a university student who is trying to learn something basically. Like this is also how I met you. Like
True.
You were a doctor, or you are a doctor, and we met just by doing a project together.
Yeah, and I did find that as well. Like when I was doing, I still do research, and this is a quick side point, but you you also don't need a PhD to do research. So I'm still an active researcher. But yeah, I do find that when you speak to people for research, like it's a lot more collaborative and people are a lot more open to sharing things with you and working with you. Whereas I think if you do have an agenda, or like if you work in a company that's a competitor or something like that, then obviously they're more reluctant to work with you and share things with you.
No, exactly that. And I think the notion that some people hold is that you have to have a PhD or do a PhD to do research. I think that's just stupid. You don't need to do a PhD. You don't need to have a master's. You can be a preschool student and preschool kid and do research if you want. There is nothing holding you back. Or you don't need a PhD to get a job in DeepMind or whatever, or OpenAI or something. This was maybe like true some time ago, but today's, at least in the computer science field or AI, no one really cares about this. I feel like the PhDs, I don't feel those are the benefits of a PhD. Everything else that I was mentioning is the benefit, but this is not one in my mind. If you want to get a job a DeepMind and you are doing a PhD for that, don't do it. There are better and easier ways to get a job in DeepMind or OpenAI or any one of those.
What's the easier way? Just work in industry and get industry experience. And
Working,
coding experience.
exactly. Like still, you will spend 5 years, in my case, like you'll spend 5 years doing your PhD or 4 years in the full-time one. There are better ways. Go do an internship in DeepMind. Go apply for the job 100 times, prepare for the interview, do a million other things. Go work in a similar industry, maybe that's not as competitive, a similar company that's not as competitive, and then build upon that and get to the DeepMind level that you want to be. Go understand what they do and learn about that and build something similar to that. Learn JAX, which is a framework that DeepMind is using. Sorry, this going into details. But I think like this is not the option in my mind. There are better ways if your goal is that. And the last one I want to mention in this area that I really like about research in general and the PhD is just the open source community, the networking side. Open source is just like you can publish everything you have done. You can put step by step all the details you have done. You can make your code available to anyone. I still love the fact that some code I wrote was used by whatever tens of thousands of people, was downloaded on GitHub. The models I made were shared. I like that aspect of the open source community, which some industries are trying to go into that, or some industries were in that for quite a long time. Like Google is famous for that, or Meta is currently famous for that. But in the PhD, it's just everything. There is nothing that you are holding back. Everything you want, you can publish out there. If it's the biggest secret in the world that you managed to build super intelligence, you can publish the paper.
Well, I mean, your professor might have a thing or two to say about that. Yeah, I think they'll keep it to themselves. But yeah, in general, definitely everything you do, you can share, and it's for the public good and public knowledge, which I love. If you work for OpenAI, for example, or Closed AI, now that
true,
they're colloquially known as, then you can't publish many things, and a lot of things are like industry secrets or secret source. Now, like I've transitioned. So, I mean, just a bit of background about me. Like I was only maybe somewhere between half a year to a year into my part-time PhD. And I just realized like there were the positives, and maybe we go into the negatives as well after this, but it just wasn't for me, and I felt like I was trying to balance both my clinical work and my research, and it was just getting a bit too much. Whereas now I've moved to industry, so I'm working for a health tech startup, and I'm actually doing more research than I've ever done. But I can't publish most of it. So, which is a really strange feeling to me, because I'm like, oh, this is really cool. Like, I really want to share this with the world. But at the same time, I fully understand, okay, actually, this is not for sharing because there are competitors, there's a market, and, everything you publish needs to be carefully considered on how it impacts your company and the environments around that.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Some companies are trying to do a bit more open source, but most of them or most of the things are still closed. And it's normal. I mean, I completely understand. You will not put your secret source out there and be like, you can guys copy what I'm doing. There is a bit of that, but I also like both. I'm perfectly fine with both sides existing, and I completely understand why both sides are needed. I love the open source side, and I have nothing against the closed source, unless you're called OpenAI. Then I have very much many things against you.
I feel like there's a good middle ground, right? Like where I'm trying to push it to is that we publish with a delay. So like you publish stuff, but by the time it comes out, it's too late for your competitor to chase you or follow you, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, give it 6 months or 1 year and then you push it out. I think that's the idea.
Yeah. And I want to mention one last thing before we go into a couple of the negative things. I think there is a stereotype or a notion or something that a PhD is like extremely hard, that you'll be working days and nights and that you'll be dying there. I'll be honest, I didn't get this feeling. I felt like the PhD was relaxed and fun. Sure, sometimes you work a bit into the night, but try doing a startup and you'll see about working into the night. I've done startups before the PhD, so I think like it was really nice. Again, maybe it was part-time, so I was a bit more relaxed on that side. If I wanted to learn a new skill, I could basically be like, okay, next 2 months, I'm not doing anything. I'm just learning this new thing I want to learn. And that was it. There was no like, my supervisor was also awesome. So that contributed quite a bit. He was very relaxed and allowed me to basically do whatever I want, which was very nice. I feel like I liked when someone enables me to do what I want and to do it in the best way I can. And you would not really get these in industries. I didn't get these in industries that I can say like, oh, for the next 3 months, I'm learning PyTorch. No, you are not. That doesn't work. Like, here I could do it. Yeah.
In the company. Yeah, no, it sounds like you had a really good environment, like great supervisor. And did you have a team with you? This is what I wanted to know. Like, were you working alone, or was there like a nice setup where, you know, usually there's like master students, PhD students, postdocs, like in the lab, and the professor, and then everyone kind of supports each other. Did you feel that, or were you more driving projects by yourself?
I feel like it is a bit mixed, to be honest. You are driving your own projects by yourself, and you are recruiting basically other people to help you. And everyone is doing this. Like that's why in the first year I was part of 20 different projects, which was not a fun thing. You should never do that. So I think like on one side, you are a bit alone. Like this is, for example, one of the negative sides I want to mention. I do feel that in the PhD, you are almost a one-man show. In the industry, I was a bit used to, like, again, if we are looking at computer science, I was a bit used to, I need to train a machine learning model. I was used to someone will set up the training infrastructure that's needed. Someone will do the data collection. Someone will do the data pre-processing, and then I'll do the training part. I'll do the model building or whatever else. And 80% of my work was in the model building side. But in the PhD, I have done the process, data processing, the data collection, the annotation guideline preparation, like everything. I have done it because I can recruit people to help me, like with, for example, a bit of the clinical side, or help me code some pieces here and there. But everyone also has their own projects. Everyone has their own stuff they want to do, and they will help if they are an expert in something, and then they can jump in. But you don't have these separation of responsibility that you maybe have in companies, where you have departments that are responsible or people that do that. But you need to build a website. In a PhD, you go and build it yourself. In the company, I have web developers that build websites. So like it's a bit of you do everything, which can be a bit like the most negative feeling I got from that is I felt like I'm not using my time efficiently. I could be working on something where I'm much better at instead of learning web development. But I mean,
but that's the point, I guess, of a PhD, right? Like did you find it useful that to learn those different steps? Like maybe they were, you know, possibly quite simple, but actually you ended up learning something which became useful in the future. I don't know, like gathering data, for example, seems quite tedious, but it's probably a very useful skill to have.
I could have done with much less of that, to be honest. Like I agree you learn, but I could have done with much less. I would have been fine with doing 10% of the data gathering, website building, server maintenance that I've done.
Especially in clinical research, a lot of it is you're on your own. Like you're consenting patients, you're doing everything, you're measuring the outcomes, you're doing the statistical analysis. Everything is like a one-man show. But now I'm experiencing like an industry. I was like, wow, actually people are doing so many things to help me. Like I come up with an idea and then immediately like 3 or 4 people start helping me. They set everything up, and then I only do like the clinical bit, and then everything like from data to server to infrastructure to like AI model design, like that's all like taken care of or like collaboratively. So I feel like it's like I'm moving so fast. Like I feel like I've achieved more in a month in industry than I normally do by myself in research. You know, probably like 3 or 4 times faster because I'm just leveraging so many people with skill.
No, that's exactly what I wanted to say, is that like in industry, all of you have one goal. And in the PhDs, every PhD student has their own goal, has their own project, has their own thing they want to do in industry. If the company is doing whatever, clinical coding, your goal is to achieve the clinical coding. All of the people are working together. If you have an awesome idea about how to do it, everyone jumps in, does their part that they are extremely good at, and done, like 2 weeks later. So that was a big downgrade on my side, and I was thinking like, man, if I had my team from my company, I could be able to do this in 5 days instead of me spending 3 months to do it. So that was took a bit to get used to that.
You said that everyone doing a PhD have different goals, and that makes sense. Everyone's doing a different projects, they have different things. But I feel like one goal does unite every single
the
researcher.
Worst
one goal, and that is publications. I feel like there's this culture of publish or perish, which you may have, the listeners, like you must have heard this before. Like a lot of researchers now, you know, they almost have to, in order to stay alive, publish a certain amount of papers, and they have, and ideally prestigious journals. This is like a big thing, and you know, around me in my professional life, like doctors work for free often just to get their name on papers outside of their normal time. It's such a big thing, and maybe it's something that culturally I think is quite complicated. Like on one hand, I love research, and I do agree that there needs to be, you know, peer review, and there needs to be journals that have a certain idea of scientific rigor. But at the same time, it's very hard. I hear a lot from researchers and PhDs. They really feel the pressure, like, oh, I need to publish. Sometimes at the detriment of the quality of their work. But can you speak to this? Did you feel that pressure as you were going through your PhD to publish? You mentioned you got rejected a few times. How did you bounce back?
I think like I of course had the same pressure. I was a bit lucky in the sense that I published a lot of papers, much more than you usually need or would do during a PhD. I think I maybe published like 20, 30 papers in 5 years, which is a bit more than you would normally do in a PhD. But there was still that pressure. And what I just think is that it is publishing papers is awesome. Writing papers is awesome. In the idea, I love the scientific method, and I love how you approach writing a paper. Like really what I explained is that just a bit ago I was mentioning in the paper, in the first part, in the introduction of the paper, you explain what already exists. You start a paper by saying, what's the idea? What's it that you want to do? You then go on exploring what already exists so that you don't repeat your work. Then you present your methods and how you have done this, and that you have properly validated, that you have properly done it in a scientific way, and then you present your results. This is like the perfect scenario, and I think in any project, irrelevant is this a research project or a hobby project or something I'm doing for industry, that approach is perfect to me, and that's how you should present results. But somewhere in the past, whatever, 20 years, 30 years, I don't know, 10 years maybe, we went a bit wrong and the metrics became, let's just publish more. You have to publish more, you have to do more, you have to have more papers, you have to publish 5 papers a year. And that is the only thing you get rewarded for. One of the only criterias me as an academic has is how many papers did I publish or how many citations did I get, which to me is the absolute wrong motivator for anyone.
Yeah, I feel like we've over-optimized as a race to citations and papers. And, you know, what you described just then was the scientific method, right? Like you start with a hypothesis, you develop a method to address that, and then, you know, you have some results, you evaluate that. But what I see now is reverse scientific method for publication. So we start with what is highly publishable, or like what's a topic that's highly publishable? Like what data do we have? And how can we reverse engineer it so that the result is like click worthy or like view worthy? It's like really, it's not how science should be done. And I see it more and more nowadays. Like, it's a real shame because I do think somewhere along the line there is a loss of that pursuit of knowledge, which is why I initially was drawn to research in the first place.
The citations are, again, one of the primary metrics. And in most cases, in 95% of cases, they are useless. Because, like, when I currently look at some of my most cited papers, there are two kinds of people or two kinds of papers that cite me. One who is implementing something new and just is showing how bad my results were and how good the results they have are, without really like trying to do anything or explain in detail why is this different or why this comparison makes no sense. Who cares? And I am at fault for this. I have done the same thing. I have done the thing where I'll take someone else's tool, run it out of the box and be like, it's worse than the tool I made. Again, because you are so much under pressure to publish something that I don't have the 3-4 months to properly test all the other tools and spend whatever 6 months building up, writing and doing all of that. You are under pressure to do it fast, so you don't have time to properly explore other tools. And what's more, because the other person, when they were writing their paper, was under pressure, the code they have published is at best very hard to use. At worst, it's completely impossible to use. So I have to use someone else's tool who was also under pressure, who didn't really maintain it because no one really rewards maintenance of the code. No one really rewards that your code is looking really nice. No one cares about that at all.
Once you've published, it's just like, move on.
Once you publish, that's it. That's the end of the road for that project. And for most scientific people, that's it. Some people continue building on top of the tool you published and then you continue maintaining it. But that's a different story. In any case, what I wanted to say is that some of the citations just come from someone saying like, this is a baseline, we are now better than it. And the other type of citations, which is even worse, comes from someone doing the introduction and just having to mention other tools in the area. Like I'm doing, again, assume I'm doing LLMs. I'm writing a new paper on a new method for LLMs. What I do is go to whatever, Google Scholar or something, find the top 5 papers on LLM, cite them. That's it.
Yeah, literature review.
Exactly,
like
review.
Often they don't even read they often don't even read the paper, right? They're just like, this exists. And you know, I've noticed the things that get the most citations are review articles and systematic like reviews / meta-analyses. Like I saw someone post the other day. I think someone was like, "Oh, I've passed 2,000 citations. Like it's such a big milestone. I'm the best." And then you look at the Google Scholar profile. It's like, oh, they were like 7th author of a review paper that they jumped onto in Nature or something. All the other papers, they're not doing any real research.
Yeah.
Right? Nothing's novel. Nothing's like they have a research papers of like 2 citations or something, or like there's nothing new, and it's just crazy. Like, yeah, they're so like geared to this metric that they just forgot what being a scientist is about.
No, but I agree, but it is not that I am not faulting students or people who do this almost at any case, at any point. I am faulting mostly the system of what is rewarded.
Exactly.
If like this is really reinforcement learning, if your reward is number of citations or number of papers you've published, you will optimize for that reward because that allows you to progress, get bigger grants, or like get more money so that you can do your projects, or get to the professor position so that you can teach or whatever else. Like that is the metric that we are judged by. So it is normal that I will optimize for it.
And is it not there's a risk of overfitting almost? Like,
yeah.
I know many researchers may just like write review papers or do like scoping reviews and stuff. That gets a lot of citations and views and traction. But then I'm thinking like, okay, what real skill have you developed? Surely by the time you're a postdoc or something and you want to do something novel, you get a bit stuck. Like you'd just be perpetually writing review papers then, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I think that's it is one of the bad things. And I think like it is basically left. I think most people after some time understand how the system works and what they really should do and probably start ignoring. There are still researchers or people that are cited millions of times that just go after citations. I think that's a stupid thing to do, to be honest. I think most people will not settle down will understand what's the important part and why are you doing the science side. Most of my time, if I'm looking at that, I've spent making sure the code is nice, making sure I write tutorials, I write like documentation about things, or even papers that I know will be cited 3 times, but I'll spend a year on them. It is fine because I'm very happy with the result I got. It impacted even if it impacted one patient, I'm very happy with that because, okay, for one patient, this was very important, or for one university somewhere, this tool was useful. So I think a lot of people come around and understand like, oh, the citations are maybe not so important. And I do think, at least in the AI field, this is getting a bit better. The open source community is strong. People value a lot that you are putting your code out there, that the impact you are having is not just citations, but are people using what you have made, or that you have nice tutorials about what you have made and all of that. So I think it is getting a bit better, but I also feel that something needs to change, or that universities at least have to have a way of rewarding the people or valuing other things next to just citations. There has to be something where you are not just incentivizing citations for PhD students. Have something else. Have a way to incentivize the nice code. Or a journal should not just be accepting or a conference should not just be accepting your paper. They should also be checking your code. They should be making it a bit better. And we don't have to go for quantity. We can reduce the number of papers by 10 times. It will still be impossible to track how many papers are published every day. But it will be much higher quality and much nicer maintained.
There is a second metric, though, like which I'm sure you experience as well. Like, apart from papers and citations, there's a second metric, and that is how much money you bring in, how many grants you win,
And
you know, how much funding you
true,
get.
but that's also mostly connected to papers. All of it somehow links
True.
back to papers. But yeah, grants are, I mean, for PhD students, that's irrelevant. For this is more for once you go a bit higher. But yeah, that is really the negative side of the publishing. And I want to mention one other awesome thing that I realized basically while doing the PhD, and that I think everyone should be doing. First of all, like I want to say, like, you are doing the PhD for yourself. My main thing was I want to learn in the PhD. You want to build your profile. You want to learn a lot of new skills. You want to improve your network. Irrelevant of how much we are ignoring this, the network part is extremely important. And yeah, in any case, to be able to do something like this, you cannot just write papers. Honestly, no matter how harsh this might sound, not very many people read papers. It's not a pastime for many people that you see like, oh, someone opened the Nature journal and is reading papers. Nature, you might even see that, but not even many researchers read papers. So you want to have other mediums, like write blog posts. Every blog post I've written got 10,000 times more reads than every paper I've ever written, which is a way to bring your research closer to the general public. Very few people can understand a paper, me included.
And the thing that shocked me is that actually by the time a paper is published in the journal, it's already out of date, especially computer science, but also in every single industry as well. Like, you know, just have a think, you know, you do an experiment, to write up would probably take a few months, to then get through the peer review, the publication in the journal, the back and forth that you get could take up to a year, right? Like we've had that, we've had a
easily.
paper back and forth for a year. So by the time it comes out, it's almost a year and a half out of date. So, you know, this is it's no longer innovative, you know. And these are papers that we're talking about, like the big journals, right? Like Lancet, Nature, like anything. Like, don't, if you want to be up to date and be at the forefront, you're not reading journals. You're not reading.
No, exactly. Yeah, you're not
journals.
reading journals. Yes, exactly. Papers published in journals. I don't know when was something I read last time from a journal. Everything I'm reading is published on Archive or MedArchive on the preprint servers or blog posts.
Yeah,
and
or even like social, like blog tweets. It's also why we're doing this podcast, right? Like, you can get news out a lot faster.
Yes, 100%, and it is unbelievable. Like, I do think every PhD student and every professor later, or every whatever postdoc should have a blog post and possibly should have a YouTube channel. I think the YouTube channel might be a bit too much, and for some people they just don't want to do it. I was one of them. I hated doing YouTube. I'm still not too big of a fan. Not a fan. It is just like, it is not my preferred ways of communication. But a blog post, you can write that always. On one side, you learn how to write nicely, and you learn how to write for the general audience, how to write things that are easy to understand, easy to digest. And you will make your research much more known to a much wider audience. And it's not a bit. Most papers don't receive any citations. They should be like clear. In Nature, I think the average citation, not the average, I cannot remember. Is it the median that is like 5 citations or something like that? It is very low. Most papers will never be read or never receive a citation. But write a blog post, make a bit of an audience that is interested in what you are doing. I think that is the best you can do for your research.
Yeah, and find a community, whether that's through conferences or through social. Like, you know, for better or worse, there's a lot of people on Twitter and LinkedIn. A lot of them maybe in related fields, and you can reach out, you can start a community. Like, there are always people interested in different types of research. Like, I've found a lot of people on LinkedIn or whatever, like tens of thousands of people, like, who, well, I'm sure they're not all interested, but when I talk about research, some people, like, more people listen than they do read my papers.
Oh no, exactly. I think like most people that have contacted because they read a tutorial I wrote, because blog post is, you can also write tutorials, you can write summaries, whatever. 99% of people was from blog posts, and 99% of the impact of the tools was just because of the tutorials or having a nice GitHub repository or something. Otherwise, if it was just a paper, I think like everyone would have ignored that. It's hard. Again, I'm seeing today, every day, there is 100 interesting papers in the AI field that gets published that I would need to read. There is no way I can do that. I have a list of like the standard reading list that every researcher has. There is 10,000 papers inside of it. There is no way I can read that. But if there is a blog post, someone I really like how they write or the topic they're exploring, it takes me 5 minutes to read that. And I'll always do it because sure, why not? Or if someone is writing a tutorial about a tool, I'll use that whenever I will need that tool or whenever I will want to use it. So it is, not many people do it. Very few PhD people do this, but I think it is one of the most impactful things you can do.
So one interesting question I had is, a lot of people are using these generative AI tools like ChatGPT, Llama, whatever, to help them code. And a lot of researchers now say that AI is so good at coding that perhaps going for a degree in computer science or software engineering is no longer worth it. What do you think about that? Do you think they should still go for pure like computer science degrees if they want to get into AI? Do you think this field is still going to be booming in 10 years' time?
I think today is the best time ever to do a PhD in computer science or AI or applied AI. I think like there was never a better time to do this. If you remember, like, just to mention one thing and then I'll focus on the big part again. At the beginning, I was saying what annoyed me the most is that I had to build websites, even though I didn't want to do that. I had to do the data pre-processing. Now I can have ChatGPT do it. Now I can have Claude build my website. Yesterday, I created a website in 5 minutes, which would be impossible. Like, normally it takes me 2 weeks to do a website because I don't know how to do it. So you basically like are outsourcing all of the annoying stuff to the LLMs. And again, I don't think a computer science PhD is a PhD in learning how to code. Like everything that we were talking about, it is really about you having a moonshot idea and going for that. You want to make your robot that will clean your house, go for it. This is the place where you can do it. You want to make a patient supervision system so that you are looking if they're falling or if they are unconscious, whatever, at home, or tracking patients in hospitals or alert systems or any of that. Like, go for it now. It is a much better time than it ever was to go for these applied AI approaches. But even on the other side, for the rest of standard AI, in a sense of pure AI, I want to improve, for example, the number of tokens I can process with my AI. I want to improve the memory of my AI. I want to improve the mathematical reasoning. The models are on the verge of being able to do all of these. So why not go and try to do it? Because I don't think we'll solve all the problems in the next 5 years. I don't think we'll get to super AI in the next 5 years. If we do, then all PhDs are irrelevant. Then no matter which one you are choosing, it is irrelevant if a super AI is better than you at that. But I don't think that's the next 5 years. I think currently is the best time to have the biggest impact with your PhD.
It sounds like you're saying that you need to be focused on an idea. So you're not doing the degree for the sake of like coding, but you
Yeah.
have an idea, and just like what you did, like you had an idea to create a prediction system for patients, a generalist predictor. So that's applying AI to a specific domain or specific project. So yeah. And I think that's very right. Like, have in your head the idea of a moonshot or something you'd love to achieve, and yeah, like have fun in that journey and learn the skills that you need to build it.
No, exactly. And again, with the open source community, every day we are getting more and more tools that we can use for free. We were just last week we covered DeepSeek R1, which is almost the best reasoning model out there. You have the option to take that model and say like, oh, I want to fine tune this model for my specific use case in agriculture. Do a PhD of applying AI in agriculture. I do think very soon it will be that every PhD ever will be using AI to some extent for something. Doesn't have to be I'll be training AI models, but I'll be using a bit of the AI side just because it is so widely applicable that almost no matter which field you choose, oh, I can do a bit of that with AI. Cooking, sure, I can do a bit of that with AI.
Okay, well, I hope that was useful to our listeners, and for those who are considering a PhD, hopefully those tips were useful for you, those pros and cons. We'll probably be doing a bit more of these episodes where we just talk peripherally about, not specifically AI in healthcare, but around like academia and other things like that. But yeah, let us know what you think. Give us a like and subscribe in the comments if you want to hear more of this kind of thing.
Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
See you on the next one. Bye.